At 3:03 a.m., the Thompson household lay shrouded in a heavy, oppressive silence, the kind that blankets a suburban home in the dead of night. Mark Thompson, a seasoned Marine veteran with scars from distant battlefields, slept soundly beside his wife, Sarah, in their master bedroom. Down the hall, their 12-year-old son, Ethan, was still awake, his face faintly lit by the glow of his phone. It was a school night, and though he knew sleep was overdue, the pull of endless video clips kept him restless. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Inside, every creak and sigh of the house seemed amplified. Then, a deafening crash shattered the stillness as the front door splintered under a brutal force, the sound ripping through the walls like a gunshot. Ethan's phone slipped from his hands, hitting the carpet with a muffled thud. Before anyone could react, a harsh voice bellowed, "Police! Don't move!" But Mark's instincts, sharpened by years of combat, screamed that something was off. No real officer would kick down a door without warning, without identifying themselves. The voice was unsteady, almost frantic. No knock, no badge, just chaos. Mark bolted upright, pulling Sarah close and whispering, "Stay down." His mind raced through every emergency plan he drilled into his family. This wasn't a random burglary. It was calculated, reckless, and wrong. In his room, Ethan's heart pounded like a war drum. He could barely breathe as adrenaline surged through him. He recalled his father's lessons. If danger came and Mark wasn't there, Ethan was to protect himself and the family. Under his bed lay a .22 rifle, legally registered in Mark's name, a training rifle, light but lethal enough to send a warning. Ethan wasn't a soldier. He was a kid who loved soccer, dogs, and superhero comics. But tonight those things faded. Heavy boots stomped through the living room, drawers were yanked open, and furniture crashed. Fear urged him to hide, but his father's voice echoed louder. "Family first. Protect your own." With trembling hands, Ethan grabbed the rifle. The cold metal steadied him, like stepping onto the soccer field before a big game. He slid off the bed, every move silent, his senses razor sharp. The boy he'd been an hour ago vanished, replaced by someone who knew his world was no longer safe. The footsteps grew louder, rough voices barking orders with a thrill that made Ethan's skin crawl. He crept to his doorway, staying in the shadows, gripping the rifle with the barrel down, finger near the trigger guard, just as Mark had taught him. There was no time to wonder who these men were or why they targeted his home. Only one truth mattered: if he didn't act, he could lose everything. The intruders stormed in like a hurricane, 4 men in black t-shirts emblazoned with HOA security. Balaclavas hid their faces, leaving only sneering mouths and cold eyes visible. They moved with practiced aggression, led by a tall, bearded man whose wild gaze and fake police baton radiated menace. Mark stepped into a hallway, placing himself between the intruders and Sarah. "Show me a warrant," he demanded, his voice steady, a commander's tone. The bearded man laughed, a chilling sound. "Warrant? Your HOA dues are late, pal. We're in charge now." The absurdity of the excuse, HOA dues justifying a 3 a.m. invasion, hung in the air. Mark didn't flinch, but his jaw clenched. He'd seen lawlessness in war zones, never in his own home. The men spread out, tearing through the house like wolves. One ran through the kitchen, scattering silverware. Another toppled furniture, shouting demands. A family photo, Ethan at a soccer game, grinning with his trophy, crashed to the floor, glass shattering. Hidden in the shadows, Ethan watched, his knuckles white on the rifle. One intruder grabbed Sarah's arm, yanking her so hard she stumbled. "Where's the cash?" he snarled. Something inside Ethan snapped. Fear burned away, replaced by a molten rage. These weren't protectors, they were predators. Mark tried to de-escalate, his voice calm but his eyes calculating the threat. He needed a miracle. Unseen, Ethan decided to be that miracle. He squared his shoulders, raised the rifle, and braced himself. The intruders continued their rampage, laughing cruelly, stealing Sarah's wedding rings and smashing a vase Ethan had made in 3rd grade. The bearded man shoved Mark, who stumbled against the wall. That was the final straw. Time slowed. Ethan inhaled, centered the sights, and squeezed the trigger. Crack! The first shot tore through the hallway, hitting the man holding Sarah in the leg. He screamed and collapsed, releasing her. Crack! The second shot grazed past the bearded leader's head, splintering the wall. Dust rained down as he flinched. Chaos erupted. Sarah's scream pierced the air. Mark, gasping, surged to his feet. The intruders, once cocky, scrambled like cornered animals. The wounded man dragged himself behind a couch, clutching his leg. The bearded leader barked orders, but fear cracked his voice. Ethan stood firm, rifle steady, no longer just a scared boy but the family's last line of defense. Across the room, one intruder dove for cover, knocking over a lamp. Another fumbled at the back door, desperate to flee. Ethan's mind was clear: hold the line. The bearded leader glared at him from behind a toppled table, their eyes locking. He'd underestimated this family, this boy. Mark seized the moment, lunging at a wiry intruder and wresting away his baton. With a swift strike, he knocked the man out, blood speckling the carpet. The remaining intruders bolted for the broken front door, but the bearded leader spun back, pulling a pistol. "Don't touch my son!" Mark roared, his voice shaking the walls. Ethan saw the gun, his focus narrowing to a single point. Instinct and love took over. He aimed and fired. Crack! The shot struck true, sending the pistol flying from the leader's hand. He howled, clutching his wrist. The intruders' bravado crumbled as they fled, stumbling over debris, their retreat marked by the squeal of tires from an SUV speeding into the night. The house lay in ruins, shattered glass, overturned furniture, a splintered door. But the Thompsons stood unbroken. Ethan kept his rifle ready, chest heaving, fueled by righteous anger. Mark placed a hand on his shoulder, their silence forging a bond of shared survival. Sarah, trembling, called 911. When police arrived, Officer Daniel Harris reviewed the security footage and nodded. Clear self-defense. These fake HOA thugs have been terrorizing the area. You've given us what we need to nail them. Within days, the story exploded. News outlets ran headlines. Heroic family fights off fake HOA invaders. Ethan, hailed as a young hero, shunned the spotlight. In court, the evidence was damning: footage, bootprints, bloodstains. The judge's voice was iron. You terrorized a family under false authority. You'll pay dearly. The intruders received long sentences, a clear message: no one could invade a home and walk away unscathed. The Thompsons left the courthouse under an autumn sun, not vengeful but resolute, knowing they'd faced darkness and prevailed. That night, on their porch under a starlit sky, Mark and Ethan sat in creaking chairs. Silence held them, heavy with loss, innocence, safety, but also strength. Ethan broke the quiet. "Dad, are you proud of me?" Mark's hand rested on his son's shoulder, his voice thick. "Ethan, I'm prouder than you'll ever know. You didn't act out of fear, you acted to protect us. That's real strength." Ethan's eyes stung, but he sat taller, the weight of his choice settling like armor. The stars above bore witness to a boy who'd become a man, not through violence, but through courage. What do you think? Was Ethan's response heroic or reckless? Share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us where you stand on standing your ground in a crisis. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that spark debate and keep you on the edge of your seat.